Welcome to the Cyrus Forum. Cyrus Forum aids peaceful, durable transition to democracy in Iran through a multi-stakeholder collaborative process, convening Iranian leaders with each other and with international experts, lessons and best practices in priority sectors. Today, we're going to talk about Iran's water issues and the environment. Thousands of years ago, many Iranians knew the value of water. Cyrus the Great said, "Freedom, dignity, wealth together constitute the greatest happiness of humanity. And without water, nobody's going to be happy." Today, we have a wonderful panel consisting of environmental journalists and experts, civil engineers, and hydrogeologists. My name is Nikahang Kowsar. I'm an environmental journalist and water issues analyst based in Washington, D.C., and I'm on the advisory board of the Cyrus Forum. Today, Shooka Bidarian, the sustainable development expert and environmental correspondent of Manato TV, is with us. As well, Dr. Ehsan Daneshvar, hydrogeologist and environmental expert from Wales, will guide us through many issues that we will have to ask about. And our civil engineer and hydrostructural expert from British Columbia, Roozbeh Eskandari, will talk about many issues that are dear to many water experts and also masses in Iran. Thanks again for joining us. Shooka, I would like to start with you. You have been in the forefront of many environmental issues, I can say even battles. You have talked to many experts about the needs of educating people, changing the trends of governance and management in different countries. But now we're going to focus on Iran. One major question that comes to mind is how could we actually change and elevate the mindset of millions of people who understand that there are many issues with Iran's environment, but cannot find a solution?
Thank you so much for your invitation and having me here today, and greeting from London. Well, the question I think is that is everybody aware of the depth of the problem that we are dealing with at the moment in Iran? How serious is it to Iranian people? And I think I'm going to split Iranians into two groups. It's the Iranian nation and the government of Iran. There is no doubt that in recent years, the continuous droughts and the prolonged dry seasons have resulted in severe water shortages and tensions, as we have seen and experienced, particularly last year, as more people around the country are experiencing water shortages in their daily lives, whether it's drinking water for household and hygiene purposes, or farmers who are simply struggling to make a living as their very water-intensive crops depend on vast volumes of water, which we simply do not have anymore. So based on my experience and what we see and cover in the news, the Iranian nation is very much aware of the issue, but I'm not certain if the majority of them know the depth and the seriousness of this problem. I still hear many experts, in particular in Iran, and even journalists refer to Iran's water problem as a crisis. But the truth is that we all know that with almost all our groundwater resources gone and the high demand for water, which no longer matches the available water budget, we are in a state of water bankruptcy. So we have emptied almost all of our groundwater without consideration of any strategy or planning focusing on recharge of these resources. And now, of course, due to changing climate and overexploitation of surface water, we have also dried up many of our precious wetlands, rivers, and lakes. But does the government of Iran know about the problem? that is a completely different matter, as in their action, we do not see any understanding of the term sustainable development. The ideology of this regime is only to gain political power in the region at the expense of literally spoiling and the destruction of Iran's natural resources, which ultimately endangers the present and the future of the Iranian people. So about 4 days ago, the director of National Drought and Crisis Management Center of Meteorological Organization, I'm hoping that I've translated it properly, announced that the lack of rainfall across the country this autumn is very concerning. With some rainfall even in Zagros and the western regions of Iran, the number is still much lower than the average, and many provinces have received almost nothing or well below average, and that is very concerning. It's not even summer yet. So it seems to me that the scientific evidence, whether looking at the annual rainfall or the level of surface water and groundwater, indicates the alarming situation that the country is in terms of available water. But what we need now to change the mindset, I think, is what all of us here have been trying to do, which is to showcase the solutions from similar situations around the world, and also to make sure that people are absolutely aware of the depth of the issue.
That's true. That's true. Ehsan, as a hydrogeologist who knows much better than all of us about Iran's groundwater situation, let's build on what Shooka was mentioning about the disappearance, if you will, or the overdrafting of our groundwater resources in many parts of the country. What went wrong and why did it go that way?
Okay, thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm really happy to be here around you guys. Yes, that's a very good question, because in all projects we're gonna do, we need to look back and see what went wrong, what was the best, and what we can do to avoid any more mistakes. I think I would say this is related to the two major problems. First, lack of the knowledge and science about the water and water systems and water management. That's one thing. This is a new actually science route in our country. And the second one is we rely on the one side of the management, regardless of any other impact of the water management system within that integrated water catchment system. These two items collaboratively change the picture of our system that we are facing about the climate. And what happened in the past 10 years, 20 years in our system, which our groundwater is depleting very fastly and dangerously, to be honest. And in some part of the country, which Shooka mentioned it, we are in a bankrupted as a water bankruptcy things. We're gonna face it in a harder way when the climate change is coming. That means the resonance of the climate change also can change the picture in a very brutal way, which we have seen it. We're witnessing actually these things happening in south, southeast, and southwest of the country. The main things that we could do better in the future. First, we need to go back and find all these items in details about what went wrong. And I think one of the main things in the country, especially in the south west of a country in Kurdistan, is our water resource management went through the surface water resource management, and without to look at any other impact of this poor management did to our environment, to the downstream of those rivers, downstream to those river basins. And what's happened now is you see the drought is around us. We are within a drought, and that happens not only for the lack of the water, this insecure water system, but also it's about the dust storms, lots of the other issues that we are facing. Lack of the.
If I may, what you're mentioning is that lack of integrated water management systems and putting too much money in surface water management, ignoring the facts about environmental issues and now about climate change, have all come to this point that we are in a disastrous situation where, as our scientists have mentioned, we have become a water bankrupt nation. And one thing that Shooka was mentioning was that, yes, people are aware of the situation. Does the government understand the scope of the problem?
I cannot answer to that actually, because I'm not in the government. But based on the report come out in a public media or those things, it seems they are not. But when we look at the actual what can I say, the report for the executives and senior management teams which come into the parliament, senior advisory systems, they are aware of that. In those reports have been noticed that what's going on, what's the what we're gonna face, the number of the cities they have a the crisis, the water crisis, or how many how much of those water resources are gonna vanish in the next couple of years, or the conflicts between the regions, between the cities,
and let's say townships in different basins, like in the Zion Root Basin and in, let's say, the Karun River Basin. They're not becoming good friends anymore.
No, that's about the water governance. If you have a poorly water governance system, that means you're gonna have it. It's inevitable. You cannot avoid of that.
That's true. That's true. Roozbeh, you have worked on different projects both in Iran and out of Iran. Surface water projects, structural projects in Iran, structural projects in Canada. You are a big critic of the dam building scheme in Iran, but as well, you're working on a major dam construction project right now in Canada. What has changed and where are the differences, and how can we understand the impact of the participation coming from people in the decision-making process and understand the differences between both countries?
Thanks for having me, Nikahang. Well, there's a big difference between two countries. When we're talking about Canada, we're talking about a country which has, I would say, the most water resources compared to the area and compared to the population. And when we're talking about Iran, Iran has been located in a semi-dry area with, I would say, limited volumes of aquifers and other underground water resources. The diplomacy, the strategy is different. When we're talking about Canada, we're talking about a water governance which is based on democracy, which is based on environmental justice and law. The participation of all nations, all groups, all provinces, all watershed holders, and simply everyone is effective in decision making of this dam needs to be built or not. When we're talking about the feasibility study, the part of R&D is very important. The part of environmental impact assessment is important. Sometimes they spend years and years here in Canada, and at the end of the day, the conclusion is not to build this dam in here. But in Iran, the only way of water management is like construction of dams or hydraulic channels and so on. I would say that the morphology, the climate, the land situation is totally different between Iran and Canada. In Canada, you won't see a military organization becomes the main contractor of construction of dams or any other water transfer, like interbasin water transfers, as we can see in Iran. It's been a couple of months that they finished the Ghadir project. And so you don't see such a thing here in Canada.
Of course, I should add, in the US, the Army Corps of Engineers is involved in building dams, but that's another story.
Absolutely. I'm working with a company, you know, that we have the highest, I would say, cooperation and collaboration with US Army and other countries. But as Ehsan truly mentioned, and Shooka as well, science is important. When we're talking about feasibility study, when we're talking about planning, when we are talking about making a decision that may affect generations after generations, we need to be very careful. What has been done, I mean, through the years in Iran, especially after the war between Iraq and Iran, and when they started this development, as Shooka said, it was never a sustainable development. They somehow attack to the underground water resources. They attack to the soil. The reason that we see these big numbers, steps which face the land subsidence and so on, this is not like something random. What I'm seeing here in Canada, that we got something as per se lessons learned. So if in the past they constructed a dam which is now proven that somehow criticize the wildlife or the life of the I would say the indigenous, or somehow endangers like the nature, they decided to somehow destruct these dams. Sometimes they kind of modify these dams. In the project that you said, for example, this is a good one. We are building a big dam on Site C, and the BC Hydro has spent almost $150 million to construct the fish ladders, which helps the fish like to follow their path for seeding and passing from upstream to downstream. You don't see such a thing in Iran. The environmental assessment is important here. I would say when it comes to the list of priorities here in Canada and most modern countries, environmental issues are at the top. Environment is the most important thing that needs to be taken care of, needs to be protected by the government, by the people who are in charge, but we don't see such a thing in Iran, unfortunately.
And as I remember, you mentioned in the conversation we had a long time ago that also in Ontario and Manitoba, the First Nations are really concerned about environmental issues, and they have a say in the whole process. Is that right?
They have, yeah, that is correct. They have been invited to join, to make groups and departments, and they have these veto rights. So when it comes to making a decision regarding building a dam or modification of a dam or do anything which may affect the environment, all these groups, local groups, come together as one. They decide, and at the end of the day, like they choose what should be the path forward. In Iran, we know that the governments, like the water governance and so on, is from top to the bottom. But here in Canada, things are somehow reversed. So you would see this involvement of ordinary people in policy making regarding the environment, including the water management.
Let me add my own 2 cents to this part of the conversation on today's panel. Many believe that though the Iranian officials are not aware of the threats, the environmental threats, the water issue, and other things that we are just talking about right now. I should say that in 1988, Iran's Prime Minister Mir Hossein Mousavi and his cabinet were warned. In 1989, Hashemi Rafsanjani was then the president of the country, was warned. In 2001, I myself spoke directly to Sayyid Mohammad Khatami at his office and warned him about the bad environmental policies, about bad groundwater management in Iran, and how it will actually create a crisis in the near future. Ahmadinejad was warned, Rouhani was warned. So the fact is, they have received many reports, they have been warned, but instead of sticking to sustainable development, certain elements of the Iranian regime have sustained their pockets, their deep pockets, and have and now we know that many people involved in construction projects have invested in the Western world. We have many people connected to consulting firms, to construction firms, buying real estate in Canada, and that's really ugly. That the money that was supposed to be spent to save Iran's water resources has saved the pockets of certain families. So the big problem here is we don't have accountability. Of course, to my eyes, I'm not sure. How do you think? Shooka, when talking about environmental issues with different leaders, with activists all around the world, when you go to Africa, different continents, how important is accountability in the whole environmental educational process?
I'm glad you mentioned the term globally, because I was going to answer the question by looking at a wider picture. In a world facing extreme environmental degradation, solid fundamental actions are necessary to improve our natural resources usage. Identifying the steps and planning, of course, is important, but what we often fail to deliver is supervision and follow-up to ensure the implementation of those solutions and policies put in place. If you look at the environmental laws and regulations in Iran, which I have sort of been digging into it, especially in terms of water regulations, as I had to have a few major reports on the issue. There are so many rather impressive acts, but unfortunately, they only remain on paper. There is no proper implementation and no follow-through. Moreover, there's another issue I can highlight here, and that is the single-dimensional approach to a problem. We often do not look at all aspects of a problem when we design solutions for them. And that is where sustainable development again comes in mind, because when you are especially dealing with complex environmental issues, there is no one fit for all solution. You always have to look at different aspects of a problem and take into consideration the community, the local people, and everything. Therefore, we need multidimensional approaches to any environmental problem, in this case, reducing the consumption of water, for instance, which includes not only changing the crop patterns that we always talk about, or modernizing the agricultural sector, but also to create jobs in less water-intensive sectors in order to lift the pressure on water resources. And we also need to have a trustworthy government. I think this is where we have a big issue in Iran. And I noticed that a lot, because very rarely I have heard some logical comments from the government. But because we do not have a trustworthy government, people simply cannot and do not trust and listen to the government, even when they have some, let's say, fair, maybe logical solutions for some of the problems. We need a government that is trustworthy, which then creates incentives for the nation to want to conserve their natural resources. We need to educate the public as well about water consumption and conservation. But I think, again, it is very much intertwined to that trust that we lack in Iran, because the nation and the people of Iran cannot simply trust the government and the regime to want to listen to them, although in most cases they do not provide solid fundamental solutions to any of our environmental problems. And having said that, I need to also mention how important it is to have the collaboration of the government, companies, and people. So as much as the government is important, I do believe that it is very important to focus on the public and make sure that the education is there and the awareness is there. And I'm going to give a very simple example for that. Average daily consumption of water in Iran is estimated at 250 liters per person, which is twice the global average and can reach up to 400 liters in cities like Tehran. So we also have an issue there, but then again, without a trustworthy government, the public is never going to listen to them if they have any proper solutions to these problems. We focus a lot on identifying the correct steps and implementing them, which I have seen not only in Iran, but many countries, especially developing countries. And we do not invest as much thought in making sure that we have followed through. And I have seen many failed policies regarding climate change, flood perception in countries like the Philippines, in the coastal areas. And the reason we had a big research on that and investigation, and through our social science research, we realized that there was a big disconnect between those politicians making policies have never been even to those areas affected by typhoon and a sea level rise. And then we had the local communities that had a completely different perception of flood, typhoon, sea level rise, and how to deal with it. So that disconnect between the public and government is a major issue when it comes to implementing those solutions or policies.
Thank you for pointing out this matter. Looking at the environmental movement in the US, let's say in the 50s and 60s, we got to the point that Nixon's administration founded the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. And what we have now is a powerful agency that, though it's not perfect, but it has helped pass laws or has been part of the solution in many ways, but also is important in regulating many activities. But on the other hand, in our own country, Iran, the Environmental Protection Agency is, or whatever we want to call it, the Department of Environment, has become a signing machine that just signs under projects and approves projects that lack environmental assessments, do not have, let's say, feasibility studies, or you see that the benefit to cost ratio is under 1. So it's not, the project won't be valuable. What can we learn from the activities of environmentalists and the governments who listen to the environmentalists in 50s, 60s, and 80s for the future of our own country?
Well, I think one of the main issues that we are facing here when we are comparing EPA with Department of Environment in Iran is that, unfortunately, our Department of Environment does not have and has not been given the power and the authority to make many of those decisions. And again, I have been following reports and news about new dam constructions in Iran, And before even the assessment is done by the Department of Environment, we know that the Department of
Ministry of Energy.
Thank you. Ministry of Energy then goes ahead and signs the papers. The budget is given by another sector, and it's as if even within the organizations in Iran, we do not see any collaboration. And add to that the corruption that unfortunately exists in Iran and in the country. And because of all those obstacles, in a way, you can never see the Department of Environment working to its potential. And that's the case. It does not have the authority. And again, it all unfortunately comes back to that absence of democracy in the country. We look at the NGOs, for instance. I remember, although after Trump's administration and after Trump's election, we basically had to see so many of those coal plants that we shut down before his presidency again activated and working. But because there's still a certain level of democracy in the US, we still managed to work with organizations and even states, different states in America, in order to push for local regulations, laws, and that. We do not have that in Iran. You cannot simply be a non-profit organization, an NGO, wanting to basically act on any of the environmental issues, because although it's a non-profit organization, it is completely and fully controlled by the government. Even I know that they get funds from the government, which is exactly the main issue why they always fail. Because they, again, when it comes to making those big decisions, they always have to make sure that it is very much accordance to what the government wants. So as long as we have this dysfunctioned government and this absence of collaboration between organizations, and adding to that the absence of democracy, I don't think we can really get anywhere in terms of sustainable development.
Thank you. Ehsan, as you know, in Article 50 of the Islamic Republic's Constitution, no government body is allowed to harm the environment and has to protect the environment for future generations. But what we have seen in the last 4 decades is a harmful and destructive manner led by the government and different organizations that have destroyed rivers, wetlands, aquifers. One thing that happened around, I think, 2004 was that though many had talked about an integrated water management system based on river basins, they changed the whole structure and started managing water in provinces based on provincial lines, not on basin lines. When I explain this to my viewers, some have a question: what's the difference between basin lines and river basin lines and provincial lines? Why are they not overlapping? And what has happened in the last 20-something years to our water management system that has destroyed different basins? If you will, please elaborate.
Okay. Very good. I could, borrow a couple of the sentence from all of you guys when we already talk. It's about if senior government managers they are aware of those, which you mentioned it, yes, and I said that I have seen lots of reports about the problems, and also mentioned about this water catchment management or based on the provincial management. But there is a very fine difference between they had you or they listen to you. It depends they listen to whom. You know, they must heard a lot about the issues, or they've read a lot of reports. What it depends is they listen to whom. Who's our advisory system around them to tell them which is right to do, which is wrong to do. You know, in that case, I think that was like the try and error
period
approach, actually, which is not right, especially when you have a limited resources. And also there is a big difference about the river basin management and catchment management or water catchment management in that case. This is why this catchment management system, or in which is river basin management is part of that, has been actually operated since 2000 in most of the developed countries like Australia, like the UK, and some part of the United States. I think that was a big mistake, because, for example, we have a Karun catchment, right? This got the 5 different provinces involved in that catchment, and every single of those has got their ownership about that. And that, apart from the the different plan for growth, economical plan, social plan, political plans, there are something between these provinces. We know we have a problem with the Zion route and Yazd. The canal, they bring water from the upstream of Zion route basin to Yazd.
And Yazd is part of the Siaku basin. That's totally different from Zion route.
The different basins, exactly. And all of this happens when you don't have a integrated catchment management system, which we call it ICM. When you have this ICM in place, that means all of the things happening in that catchment, it has to be managed within that system, along and with collaboration of the national growth plan or any other things. I think this has been tried and examined system, which we did it as what went wrong in a couple of the areas. If I have your attention to the one of the very good publication, we had it last year in Nature, which is the Miss Ashraf and her colleagues from the Concordia and University of California, if I'm right, Professor Alkuchek. They did this study. They just work on a public and open-based data on the water, groundwater depletion, and they found out, and they actually concluded at the end that the main problem is anthropogenic problem for the growth of Iran. Then this is why we call it bankruptcy, water bankruptcy. But what happened when in that case? What I did, I just used the data from them, and I went down and worked on four basins to see what happened to them during that 13 years period of time. And we found out a big peak or whatever breaking point in the quality and quantity of groundwater, and all matches it very nicely with the time that those surface water management system been start to operate. It doesn't matter, it was a Gotland or it was the Karun, the third Karun or fourth Karun.
So if we want to, let's say, explain this better for the audiences, that means while the Islamic Republic was constructing Gotland, Karun 3 Dam, Karun 4 Dam, and other mega structures to manage surface water, it was at this very same time destroying aquifers because of lack of an integrated water management system.
Exactly, and that actually damages those damages is all because they didn't see the whole picture, as you guys mentioned it before. They didn't look at the environmental damages that would bring after 5 years, 10 years, 25 years. When we talk about the integrated catchment management system, we have to separate it in two parts. One, the science, which Roozbeh mentioned it, science about the hydrology and hydrogeology and quality and quantity of the surface water and the groundwater, the conjunction between these two, the management of the resources, all of those. But the main part of that is what the affection of all of these, these plan will what the affection they will bring to the downstream people, to the downstream environmental precious sites, everything. This is why for the we have to go back again and talk about the water governance. We are we are missing this main piece of puzzle in our the water management system, that we don't have a water governance.
It's a lost link. And yeah, before I go to Roozbeh, okay.
I just wanted to emphasize on this. A good water governance is essential. This is very important. Is essential to achieve water security, fairly allocate water resources and services, and avoid dispute. This is the three things which that dispute is directly affect the national security. And also, you guys are the sustainable development expertise. You know how we can avoid reduce the poverty if we have a good sustainable development system. Okay.
Thank you so much. We have a little bit time constraints, so I have to go forward. But I want to add something. I was visiting the Colorado Plateau in the last 2 weeks, going to Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, and Utah. And you could see that the mistakes that water managers had made, let's say in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, is now affecting the people in the area. And because many are sticking to their water rights and do not want to change anything, they're going to face many major problems in the near future. We have less snow on the peaks. The population is much more than what it was 50 years ago. The water consumption rate is higher, and it's getting warmer. You have more water loss in your dams because of evaporation as well. And farming techniques really haven't changed in many parts in, let's say, in Utah, Wyoming, Colorado, and there should be an integrated management system in place. And when I talk to, let's say, water experts, like a professor at the University of Colorado in Boulder, he was saying that, look, we have to look at the whole basin when we manage our water resources, and we're learning from the past. But don't think that, let's say, the US is perfect and everywhere else has gone wrong. No, they've made so many mistakes here in the US, but they're learning from their lessons, as what Roozbeh was mentioning, that what they have done in Canada. But based on your experiences in Canada, you have been very active, Roozbeh, in social media, especially participating in big online meetings in Clubhouse in the last I can say 15 or 16 months. And you participate in political panels, in environmental panels, cultural panels, and push the environmental issue and the water issue to educate politicians. And many of the participants in those online panels are actually your own old colleagues in Iran. Have you seen anything changing in their mindsets in the last few years? And what do you think has to change for good if we want to elevate the conversation and help our nation in the near future?
Yeah, Nikon, thanks to you, I've been proactive in social networks, including Clubhouse, the last, I would say, few months. Well, I try to somehow show the importance of the critical situation of Iran's environment, including the water issues. And thanks to you and Ehsan, we had good rooms discussing about different terms. And at the end of the day, I believe what Shooka John said is very crucial. The public awareness is the key. So there are people in Iran's government, Iran's leaders, as you mentioned, the ex-presidents, the supreme leader, and all minions of him. They often deny the existence of the problem. And this is very important because when you like you need to capture the problem first, and then, as engineers always say, when there is a will, there is a way. What I saw back in the days was like it was like there is no intention to solve the problem. Why? Because there are some organizations uh, who make big profits, make big interest out of this hydraulic mission. So what I see in Iran's water governance body are soldiers who are dedicated themselves to this hydraulic mission. When you're talking about water bankruptcy, some people believe it's like playing with the words, but it's not. Uh, the problem is there, and the problem is severe. And if we do not take this into our consideration, if we cannot find a way to mitigate this, to remedy this, if there is no corrective uh, like action in the place, then as Ehsan mentioned, we may face this drought and depletion, and we're already in there. I believe in some places like land subsidence and the depletion of the aquifers and the static waters, uh, we've passed the uh, point of no return. And what makes me more concerned is that there is no change in policies. In Iran, the environment has been a security issue. We know that the environmental activists are still in prison. One got killed in prison, and the deputy of the organization, Dr. Kaveh Madani, uh, never got to come back to Iran because of the life-threatening issues. So turning a very, I would say, social issue like environment into a security concern, which will endangers the remedy plans, the rectify plans, like in a very bad spot. And what I try to kind of explain or describe in the social platforms, including Clubhouse, is like, besides all the social and political or whatever issues you're talking about, let's not forget, no matter the next government is, so after, I hope it happens as soon as possible. But when the government of mullahs are gone, we need to sit down together. We need to find a very rapid, quick way. Iran's environmental management, including water strategy, needs a very deep surgery. We need to cut the hands of all these organizations. We need to uh, we need to make people believe the government uh, goodwill, as Shuka mentioned, because right now there is a competition of attacking, of using the water resources, the soil, everything, the air, and we need to consider that one voice needs to be heard. we need to come together as one, and we have to believe that we are all sitting in the same boat. And if something happens in the west of Iran, it may affect the other areas of Iran. Look at the Lake of Urumia.
Not only Iran, actually, even the whole area.
The whole world. That is correct.
Now,
And
I'm so sorry. I have to cut you short.
I'm done. I'm done.
But I want to go to you, Shooka, as an environmental activist, as an educator. You have talked about sustainable development, and as well, you have talked about environmental justice to many of your audiences. Still, it's really difficult for many to understand the whole picture, the bigger picture about environmental justice. For the future of Iran, of course, the answer could be yes. But do you think that for the future of Iran, we need leaders who understand and respect sustainable development and environmental justice, or not?
The short answer is absolutely. It is crucial. Sustainable development and environmental justice is crucial to humans' existence. I'd like to highlight, before I go into my environmental justice topic, the challenge that we all environmentalists face, and that is the fact that, unfortunately, environmental degradation and the impacts of a damaged environment is often so gradual and not properly seen that it is always very difficult to try to get across the urgency and the importance of action. And that is something I think we all as environmentalists have faced different events, campaigns, and unfortunately, the environment becomes massively unimportant for the government and even the nation in a country like Iran, where people and their rights, their basic rights, are constantly overlooked due to the absence of democracy. Sustainable development is very much linked to a just world and democracy. When there are so many tangible problems which have quicker and more apparent impacts on people's lives, then it becomes a lot harder to want to prioritize matters such as environmental and social justice issues. And in a way, it is very simple-minded to ignore environmental issues, regardless of what state a country is in, because a functioning ecosystem is essential as it directly affects a country's socioeconomic, geopolitical, and national security and health aspects. So environmental justice is about preserving and enhancing the natural environment so it can support and enrich the lives of all citizens. And the first requirement is a set of clear environmental laws that protect all aspects of Iran environment, including the wildlife. But these rules and regulations, as I mentioned earlier, should be built by consensus so that everyone can contribute and understand why environmental protection is required. Given the highly educated Iran population, the citizen assemblies, online questionnaires, and elected local environmental representatives could all be ways of ensuring engagement, which is the key to a successful way of solving the environmental issues. And the second requirement is that these new environmental protections include compensation and support for people that have to change the way they live. Again, if we have a government we can trust, then we can start educating the public and try to guide them to change their lifestyle. And moreover, the environmental protection laws could also compensate landowners for protecting and enhancing the environment, for example, paying for reforestation and rewilding projects. And thirdly, there are so many examples of good environmental practices around the world, both in democracies and non-democracies, that the new Iran can use these as a basis of their new environmental program, which has been built by consensus.
Thank you very much. Ehsan, as our final question, as someone who has both worked in the UK, Canada, and Iran, and seen the impact of environmental injustice in different parts of Iran, how do you think we can educate both the leaders and the citizens to fight for environmental justice and to leave something valuable for future generations? Would it be soil resources, water resources, wildlife? What's your thought on this?
Okay, thank you. I think first of all, we all of us, we have to educate ourselves to a certain level to understand everything and collect all the data and make sure the accountability is in place. Then we have to answer a couple of WH questions. These questions is very vital. For example, who gets what waters? You know, when and how, and who has the right to use that water services and or resources, and what about the responsibilities? This question need to be answered carefully and in very details about that. We know there is the injustice in environment, and this is in quite new terms in environment especially, and we know wherever or which part of the country or basins or anywhere, I don't want to draw a line, has got a higher voice, they will get a better resources. Then we have to break that. That's coming into the democratic way of the right, and who has the right to that water, and who has the right for the what type of the water to use, and how much they have to pay for that, and how much the country will pay for that. These are the questions first need to be answered, and all things that went wrong from the first question you answer, you question me, that needs to be answered in a very detailed and accurate to understand what we need to avoid in the future. All of these needs to be collected and come as a plan, which we call it, a governance plan, to understand about the social, this 4 dimension: social, political, environmental, and also financial. All of these matters. Then we can go and approach a better justice. I know this is a very ideal to have a full justice for environment, but we can go in that case if we understand our right and what's the value of the water around us. Before you shut me, I try to shut my.
No, thank you so much. A friend of mine the other day was saying that for the future of Iran, we need an environmental guardian council that actually tests all the leaders about how they feel about the environment and how they will act. But that was a joke. But one big important factor that I think we need, Shooka was actually emphasizing on, was consensus. Building consensus as well as educating the public all together could help us reach a better point. We're in a very bad situation in our history, in our environment, our water resources, our soil, with so much degradation and deforestation that we have seen all around the country, desertification, land subsidence, and millions of Iranians have had to migrate inside the country from one province to another province. And unfortunately, based on some assessments, millions will have to leave Iran if we continue this path. Roozbeh, as somebody who has been really active in educating people in the last year or so, stepping to the next level, if the people who are fighting on the streets topple the Iranian regime, even tomorrow, a month from today, a year from today, what are the do's and don'ts in your mind that could help rebuild the nation and leave something valuable for future generations and the environment itself?
Thanks, Nikon. I believe that for dictatorship governments, ignorance is the key. So when you overcome the ignorance, when you, as Shooka and Ehsan truly mentioned, when you educate people, when you inform people, when you make them aware of their rights, including environmental justice, or which to me, it's a part of human rights. I'm not saying which one came first. It's like, doesn't matter, chicken or egg. But to me, the rights of having clean water, the rights of having the safe access roads, the rights of live under safe roof, or I would say a safe shelter, and to have a life with dignity. This is not big of a deal for modern societies like we have all around the world. But this has not been considered as a part of the people's rights in the eyes of the Ayatollah's government. I would say when I'm an educated person, when I'm fully aware of my rights, you cannot dictate anything on me. So the more public awareness we give to the people, the easier will be for them to kind of like ask from their governors. We're not talking about this government, sure, because they do not recognize the rights of living, the rights of basic terms of living, including hijab, and we know the other stuff, right? So what I've tried to do, and I'm not sure if I could, to raise the public awareness, to introduce what environmental law and environmental justice is, to show the importance of the environmental issue in Iran, and I would say to cast light on the dark parts that the Islamic Republic doesn't want you to see. And I hope the day after the freedom, the day after the victory, all these departments, all these think tanks, all these plans and feasibility studies or everything come together as one, and we can really save our dear Iran, everyone's mother, from a very tragic, I would say, death, which is pretty close, unfortunately, to our land. And I would say that would be our solemn duty for each and every one of us to help this tragedy not to happen. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much to all of you for educating me first and sharing your ideas and participating in this activity with the Cyrus Forum. You can visit cyrusforum.org to learn more about its activities and what it does. And we wish you and our dear country, Iran, a prosperous future. Goodbye.